We are holding here, just one more minute. So, excellent. We're holding here in the Gemara in Mesechta, Megillah Hatzvi-Bais 15b. And over here, we are discussing, continuing the explanation of the story of the Megillah. So we're going to read the Megillah a tiny bit to get some context. And then we're going to look at some pictures of Achashverosh's palace to get some context. We're in the palace we are discussing and how big every single room is, because the Gemara is going to start measuring how big Achashverosh's scepter stretched out. So we're going to see how large, how it fits with the modern day discoveries that they have. So in the Megillah, it was a 3-day fast that Esther asked Mordechai that all the Jews in Shushan should fast for 3 days and 3 nights, including Esther and her servants and her handmaidens. On the 3rd day of the fast, Esther is still fasting. This is the 2nd day of Pesach. Esther goes into the king Achashverosh and she stands. She stood in the inner courtyard of the king's house, Noichach Beis HaMelech, opposite the king's house.
Where are you now? Downstairs?
V'Hamelech Yoshev al Kisai Beis Hamalchus Noichach Pesach Habayis, and the king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal palace, opposite the entrance of the house. And it came to pass when the king saw Queen Esther, standing in the courtyard, Esther won favor in the king's eyes. The king extended to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Esther, and Esther stood up. And she touched the end of the scepter. So here's just a drawing, you could say, from a modern day. You see on the screen, probably should be up in a second. Here it is. Here is what it is. Esther comes into the king's palace, and she waited for the king to reach out to her out of respect to the king, and the king stretched out his scepter to Esther. Lucky. Otherwise, Esther, as we learned previously, would have been killed. I'm not sure if they could see it on the screen, but back to the mark. So that's what the Megillah says. Where exactly did this take place? So if we were going to look over here, our handy Achashverosh's palace. Here is an ancient, here is a picture that was drawn many years ago, during the time of Achashverosh, of King Achashverosh, sitting on his palace, sitting on his throne with a scepter in his hand. So see how tall the scepter is? Scepter goes all the way from where he's sitting in his shoulders all the way down to lower than his feet. So the kings had very long scepters, as we're going to see in the Gemara. How long the king's scepter was and how long it became. And in addition to that, let's go through one or two other pictures. Wrong direction. Okay, this is over here. If you can see it over here, this is the inner courtyard. It says Esther stood in the inner courtyard facing the throne room. So this is where it would be today, the inner courtyard where Esther stood. And the tiles are still the original tiles from the times of Esther. So Esther was standing on these tiles when she was standing by Achashverosh's palace. Now, zoom in a little bit. So here's a layout of the actual palace. Number 8 over here, that's a king's throne room. Inside of the palace complex, there were 3 courtyards. You have Chatzar Beis HaMelech HaChitzayna, the outer courtyard, which is number 6 over here. We're going to see later on Haman was standing in the outer courtyard. Courtyard number 7, which is the inner courtyard. And then there's number 8, which is the king's throne room. And the king, yeah.
Or did we interrupt? So we say that Haman pleaded for his life at number 6?
No, the Haman pleaded for his life in Esther's private chambers.
Oh.
But Haman, when Haman came to tell the king the idea, he wants to kill, hang Mordechai in the gallows, and the king preempted him and said, "What should I do to the man I want to honor?" That was Haman was standing number 6 in the outer courtyard. Some say maybe it was this inner courtyard, the middle one over here. It's called the Chitzayna, the outer one, because it's not connected. It's outer regarding to the inner one. If you look at the Medrash over here, brought by the Maharal of Prague, he brings a Medrash which says that there were 7 sort of obstacles, 7 checkpoints Esther had to go through in order to get to the king. And Esther is going through them one by one. So perhaps in every single one of these places was another guard, somebody else standing there. But he goes through and he explains in a physical sense, and he explains in a more of a metaphysical sense. The Maharal, he has a sefer on the Megillah called Or HaChadash, and nothing to do with the New Light Synagogue. And Or Chadash means new light. It's called Or Chadash because of the pasuk Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. New light will shine on Zion. And some people think that the light which will shine on Zion is a light of Zionism. But it's not the light which... So, but the Maharal of Prague, he brings down exactly all these 7 different checkpoints and centuries. Esther had to go through every single one of them. So the king is sitting over here in number 8. Esther standing in number 7. This will have to do with how long Achashverosh's scepter was stretched out as well. So we'll see that. All the opinions soon in the Gemara. So back to the Gemara. One beautiful explanation of the Rebbe. It says over here in the Megillah, and Esther stood b'chatzar beis hamelech hapnimis, in the inside courtyard of the king's palace. We see there are multiple courtyards. It says later on about Haman, next parak, next chapter. It says, "Va'yomer hamelech mi v'chatzir." The king said, "Who is in the courtyard?" V'Haman ba l'chatzar beis hamelech hachitzayna. And the king came to the outer courtyard of the king's house. There's many mamarim from all the Rabbeim on these sukkim of the Megillah. The king stretching out his scepter to Esther. The Rebbe Rashab, one time in Purim, I think in the year 1916, he was in France, in Menton. And there weren't a lot of Chassidim living in France at that time, but there's several wealthy Chassidim who went to France to be with the Rebbe Rashab, as well as several Chassidim who lived in France. And so one of the Chassidim who were there,
How did he get out?
1916?
First World War.
It was First World War was going on. Good question. I don't know. So maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was 1914. That's possible. I don't have the year exact. I could check it up from the source where I read it. And one of the Chassidim who was there repeated what the Rebbe Rashab was saying. He emphasized, very strongly the point by the Fabrengen on Purim, the Rebbe Rashab would only Fabreng 3 times a year. Simchas Torah, Purim, and Yutas Kislev. So it was a very monumentous occasion. You didn't want to miss a Fabrengen of the Rebbe Rashab. He would say Mamarim almost every week. But Fabrenging, he would only do 3 times a year. And he spoke about how Haman comes, Megillah says, only Beis HaMelech HaChitzayna. In a person's heart, you have the Chitzonius and the Pnimius, the outer part and the inner part. Haman, the idea of the Nefesh HaBahamis, the Yitzhahara, is only Beis HaMelech HaChitzayna, is only in the Chitzonius, can never come into the Pnimius of a Yid. But Esther, it says, she was B'chatzar Beis HaMelech HaPnimius. She was in the inner courtyard. Because Esther, which is a Haster, the Pitla Yid, the hidden Yid in every neshama, in every person, that is in the inner courtyard. The Megillah does not use the word Pnimius, the inner courtyard, about Haman. Because Haman is always B'chitzanya, always on the outside. Even if a Yid acts in a negative way, it's always on the outside. So it says Esther stood in the inner courtyard of the king, opposite the king's throne room. Now, why does the Megillah have to tell us where she stopped, where she was standing? It doesn't say Vatelech Vatamoid, and she went and she stood. And obviously, she got dressed before she came to the king's palace. And it says Vatilbash Esther Malchus, and she got dressed in royal clothes. And we said it means with Ruach HaKodesh, with royal vision, divine vision. And she stood. She obviously didn't stand in the place where she got dressed, correct? Mm-hmm. So what does it mean? What does a pasuk say in such a word? She got dressed and she stood. Why doesn't it say she got dressed, she went, and then she stood in front of the king in the inner courtyard? So the Gemara says, Amar Reb Levi says, Reb Levi, Kivin shegia lebeis hatzlamim, once she reached the chamber of the idols, nistalka himena shchina, the shchina left her. Just like you have in, I don't know, even today, even have it in I think in Washington, but you have it in royal palaces all over. You have right next to the throne room, you have like a little private chapel, a cathedral just for the king. I think they have it, the royal, the national one in Washington as well. So when she came, and there's all these idols. If you went to France, I went to Versailles, supposedly a beautiful palace. And the whole palace is every ceiling and wall is full of these paintings of every type of pagan idol that could, imagine, the god of the sun and the god of the moon and the god of love. And, so Achashverosh's palace was no different, especially they were idol worshippers. And so once she came to Achashverosh's, private inner palace, private cathedral, Nistalka Hemena Shchina, the Shchina left her. Shechina went away from her. Amra, so she said, the famous words in Tehillim. She said these famous words. Keili, Keili, lama zaftani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Until now, she had Ruach HaKodesh. She felt divine inspiration. She's walking into the king's palace, and she feels that Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit on her. And now, suddenly, she walks, about to enter the palace of Achashverosh. She says, Keili, Keili, lama zaftani. My God, why have you forsaken me? We've brought this kapitel of Tehillim, quoted it several times, to say that Hayel Sashachar, the one who wakes up in the morning, it's going on Esther. And we're going to, so this is when Esther was about to enter the palace, the throne room of the king, she says this kapitel, chapter 22 of Tehillim. And why? Because the Shechina left her, so she says, my God, why have you abandoned me? Ruach HaKodesh, why have you left me? And then, here's what she says to Hashem. Shema, God forbid, Ata done, you are judging me. Al hashoigeg kimezid, one who does a deed unintentionally, and you're judging them as if, Hashem, you are judging as if it's being done intentional. And the simple meaning is, until now, whenever she had to be together with Achashverosh, it was always unwillingly. She never wanted to do it. Now she's submitting herself to Achashverosh willingly. So Hashem, but I'm not doing it out of my own free will. I don't want to do it. I'm doing it because I have to save the Jews. The alaoinus, and the fact that I am being forced to be with the king Achashverosh, kiratzen, you are judging me that I'm doing it on purpose, because even though I'm coming to Achashverosh for my own free will, nevertheless, she's not doing it out of her own free will entirely. She really wants to save the Jews, but not that she really wants to be with Achashverosh. Oishema, or perhaps, maybe the Shechina left me for a different reason. Al shekarasiv kelev, because I called Achashverosh with a term I embarrassed him. I wasn't respectful to him. And I called him a dog. From where?
Oh, I'll be called Haman a dog?
Called, it says over here, Haman.
Oh,
But I'm doing the Achashverosh, a simple meaning.
oh,
Perhaps I'll get into more of the detail because there's a lot on this. It says maybe because maybe the Ruach HaKodesh left me because I acted improperly by calling Achashverosh a dog. Shenemar, as it says, Hatzila micherev nafshi miyad kelev yichidasi. Go back into this chapter of Tehillim near the end. Esther davens to Hashem, Hatzila micherev nafshi, deliver my soul from the sword. Miyad kelev yichidasi. My only one, deliver from the power of the dog. So a dog, meaning she's asking Hashem, save me from being killed by Achashverosh. And she called Achashverosh. And one must, Manas Levi, Shlomo Alkabetz writes, Shlomo Alkabetz wrote a famous song. You know what it's called?
what?
What did Shlomo Alkabetz write? The
Chadadi.
Chadodi. So he has a sefer on the Megillah, Manas Levi, which says that one must give honor to the king. And by referring to him as a dog, saying, Hashem, save me from the power of the dog, she referred to Achashverosh as a dog was non-honor, not giving enough honor to the king, and therefore, perhaps that is why the Shechina left her, and she lost her Ruach HaKodesh. Immediately, Chazra, says the Gemara, Vikar Asay Aryeh. She at once, in her davening, called Achashverosh, changed and called him now a lion. Shenamar, it says in the very next verse, Hoshieni mipi Aryeh, save me from the lion's mouth. And from the horns of the Re'im. The Re'im is a very tall animal. Supposedly it's no longer around, although there are some modern Israeli scholars which say that it was a giraffe or that it was a unicorn. And the Re'im, this is one time when David Hamelech was taking his father's sheep, he came to he ran after a certain sheep and he climbed up a mountain. And he didn't realize he was actually climbing up a Re'im. Re'im, a very large animal, was so large, it says it couldn't fit into the teva. And Noach had to make a hole in the teva for the nostrils, for the nose and the mouth of the Re'im, in order to feed it and in order that it could breathe.
Actually, what's interesting is that our score, she goes according to the simple pshat that she was referring to King Achashverosh.
Right, I'll get into that soon.
Yeah.
So therefore, and David HaMelech, suddenly the Re'im got up and started walking. David HaMelech became petrified. Imagine you're standing on a mountain and the mountain gets up and starts walking. And he davened to Hashem, Ashieni, answer me from the horns of the wild ox. Then a lion came along, and the lion was standing in front of the Re'im, and then the Re'im kneeled down in front of the lion because I had to give respect to the king of the animals. So we see the Re'im, this big animal, had to give respect to the Aryeh, to the lion. Although the Re'im is much, much larger than the lion, it could obviously take apart the lion, but being as it's the king of the animals, it had to kneel down in front of the Re'im. So Esther is now saying that even though Achashverosh is like a kelev, like a dog, in the way he's acting, but still I have to give him honor, and called him a Aryeh, called him a lion. Let's go through some of this Gemara. We're going to go a lot back and forth between three different people. Two of them were very big. They were contemporaries, but very big adversaries. I can't say they didn't get along, but they spoke out very harshly against each other's svarim very often, which is Tiferes and Eibshitz and the Yibitz of Yankov Emden and Chacham Tzvi. And so Rabbi and Eibshitz, they're both Rabbanim in the same city. both have a major svarim on Megillah and many other svarim. So the Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz writes that Esther told the Mordechai, I have not been called to the king for 30 days. Now Mordechai told Esther about the decree on the 13th of Nisan. 30 days before is the 13th of Adar. 13th of Adar is a day that Haman made the decree. So Esther was thinking to herself, perhaps the reason why the decree is, perhaps why the Shekhinah left me and the decree is there is because I was with the king together on the 13th of Adar last. And that's why the decree to destroy the Jews came out to be on the 13th of Adar. Right? That's the last time she was with the king, the 13th of Adar. Now it's the 13th of Nisan. So she davened to Hashem, you should know, don't, Keli, lama zaftani, please don't judge the oines karatzin. When I was with the king last time, it was ba'oines. It was coerced when I was with the king on the 13th of Adar last. And don't consider it to be like a ratzin, like it did it on purpose. The Beit Slumim, some say, is not one that wasn't necessarily a house of tumah, of idol worship. Slumim, the Marsha himself says, that what it means when Esther says to Hashem, I was coerced, meaning Hashem, I did not want to go into this house of idol worship. Just in order to get to the king, I was coerced to go through this house. Meaning Esther was not usually seen in Achashverosh's throne room. She was never really had to go through the house of idols to get to the king. She was always in Achashverosh's private chambers. But here, Esther had to go through to get to the throne room. She had to go through the house of idols. So she says to Hashem, if the Ruach HaKodesh prophecy left me now because I'm going through the house of idols, but it's a oinus, I was forced to. I have no choice in the matter. I have to go through there in order to get to the king Achashverosh. And that's a halacha. If a person has to pass through, you're not allowed to walk in through a church or even next to a church, but if that's the only place in order to save the Jews or to do something, you have no choice but to do it.
Yeah.
Now, there's halacha in regards to shomer, watchman. A watchman who is watching sheep. He's a shepherd watching for somebody. Now, he's supposed to watch against wolves, against dogs, and if a dog or a wolf comes and eats something from each one of the sheep, the shepherd is responsible. But if it's something which is an accident, something which, he couldn't stop it, the shepherd couldn't stop it, the shepherd is not responsible. For example, if 2 dogs come, they say, or 3 dogs, so then the shepherd has no way of guarding the sheep, and he's not responsible to pay if a sheep was eaten by the dogs. Or if a lion came, said you can't expect the shepherd to stand up against the lion. So therefore, so the way he explains is like this. Achashverosh, until now, Esther was calling him a sheep. He's calling her a dog. Because a dog, Sir Biankiv Emden writes, a dog is a accident, meaning there's nothing you could do about it. I'm sorry, not a dog. A dog is something that could be protected. So she says, maybe my problem was I never took the danger of Achashverosh too seriously. Maybe until now I was thinking Achashverosh was like a dog, and I didn't take his danger too seriously. But now he compared to Achashverosh to a lion, which a lion is dangerous. So therefore, she changed what she said from calling Achashverosh to a dog to a lion. In addition to that, it says that there's a big difference in the way a dog works or attacks and a lion. Dogs, they stick their tongue out, they make a lot of noise, they bark very, very loudly. And they're much, they're from far away, you could hear them, you could see them. But they're scared of people. When a person comes close, they usually slunk back. So they usually's bark is bigger than their bite, usually by dogs. The lion has an exact opposite nature. Lions usually sit on the side or sit in hiding in the brush, and they're very quiet. And you could walk right by them without even knowing they're there. And without making a noise, suddenly they're going to pounce and eat their prey and destroy their prey. And no one could protect themselves from the lion. So in the beginning, Esther considered Achashverosh like a dog. His bark is bigger than his bite. Meaning he says very big things. I want to destroy all the Jews, men, women, children in one day. He talks a lot, but he's never going to come around to actually do it. And this, Esther, you could say, was miscalculating. And when she came and she sees a Shechina left, and she realized I made a mistake. Achashverosh is like a lion. Like we learned before, the mashal of the Achashverosh and Haman was a person who had a pile of earth and a hole, and one wanted to fill one with the other. Achashverosh was just as anti-Semitic, or even more than Haman. And right away, she davened to Hashem, save me from the lion, one who is a quiet conniver trying to kill the Jews. And the Rabbi Satmar writes, what's so bad? Esther compared Achashverosh, who wasn't a tzaddik by any means of the word, to a dog. What's so bad? So we know that a dog also, a dog makes a lot of noise, likes barking from far. The Jewish people, when they bowed to the idol, and that's why there was a decree against them, they only did it in a noisy way, meaning they didn't actually mean it. Esther is davening to Hashem. Don't judge when the Jews bowed to the idol during the times of Nebuchadnezzar, and that's why there's a decree of annihilation. They were forced to do it. They didn't do it on purpose. Just like the dog, which just makes noise but doesn't really pose as much danger. And therefore she's davening, Hashem, save me from Kollel, from the dog, from those who make noise, and Hashi'eni, save me from coming to the idea of a lion which actually destroys. Save me from coming to such a situation like a lion. In general, there's an idea which is brought down by Chassam Sofer. One is supposed to give honor to a king. Even if the king is wicked, like in Nebuchadnezzar, you still have to give honor to the king. You could disagree with the president of the US from today till tomorrow, but there's something called respecting the office of the presidency. And for sure a king, somebody which Hashem decided that they should be in a position of power, it's someone you have to give honor to. And therefore she had to give honor to a king, Achashverosh, as well. So even Achashverosh, who, again, he was a wicked person. He stopped the Jews from building the Beis HaMikdash. And he drank wine, and he was happy to destroy the Jews in general. And Esther called him a dog, and still was considered to be something improper. Us, we talk about lots of other people, says the Rebbeinu and Eibshitz. The wealthy person, we always talk down about him. He's selfish. He does this for this reason, for that reason. For sure, we can't do that. Talk negative about somebody else. And contrary to only talk good things about every single other person. Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes, if you look in the words of the capital of Tehillim, says Hatzila mecherev nafshi. I'm highlighting it on the screen. It says Hatzila mecherev nafshi. Esther davens, save my soul from sword. What are the first letters of Hatzila mecherev nafshi? Hatzila is
Hey,
mecherev,
Mem,
nafshi.
Nun.
What does that make up? Which word?
Haman.
Haman. She's davening to Hashem, save me from Haman, from the sword. From the dog. A dog, he says, is very loyal. Anyone ever had a dog? Dogs are very, very loyal to their owners. That's the whole day. They're only looking at their owners. Owner walks outside. They're always facing back to their owners. Haman was Achashverosh's dog, meaning always running after Achashverosh. What could I do? I want to get on his good side. So she davened, Hatzila mecherev nafshi miad Kollel v'chidasi, save my soul from the sword, save my soul from Haman, who was like the dog who was Achashverosh's lackey, trying to always ingratiate himself with Achashverosh. And then afterwards, she realizes that their main enemy is not Haman. And that's what mistake Esther davened. So when you over here on the screen, right? In this Megillah over here on the screen, it says, save my soul from the dog, which is Haman. It's going according to this opinion of this explanation of the Yaibitz of Yaakov Emden.
And art scrolls go according to the Pasha
Rashi.
And Rashi is going according to the context of this, and all this talk about
Correct.
Achashverosh.
Correct.
So
Achashverosh, correct.
Yeah.
But Sir Yaakov Emden, he says, she was the beginning davening to Hashem, save me from Haman. Haman's terrible plans. And in the end, she realized she doesn't have to daven to be saved from Haman, because Achashverosh is actually worse than Haman is. Rather, who does she have to daven from? Mipi Aryeh, save me from the lion. The lion is Achashverosh, the king. And that's why we said the story of David HaMelech. And she says, Mikarnei Reimim Anisani, from the horns of the Re'im. When David HaMelech was saved from the Re'im, he told Hashem, please save me. If you save me, I will build for you a Beis HaMikdash as tall as a Re'im, 100 amas tall. So Hashem brought a lion in front of the Re'im, and the lion and the Re'im bowed down to the lion. So those who, according to our sages, the hint over here is, it was a big miracle that happened. Although Esther lost her Ruach HaKodesh, she lost her divine prophecy, miracles are happening to her. None of the guards killed her, although they had explicit orders to kill anybody. And this is one of the miracles in the Medrash which says what happened to her. It says many miracles happened to her. So she told Hashem, you mean miracles, not that I should not be killed. Mipi Aryeh, from the mouth of a lion, Mikarnei Re'im. I want to build now the Beis HaMikdash, which is going to be as tall as the Re'im. Another thing is, Rabbi Nachman Tzvi writes that Esther was saying the Jews were forced to join the Famila of Achashverosh. That's what she's davening to Hashem. Don't consider it to be fact that listen to Yitzhahara. They were forced to. They didn't have any choice in the matter. Esther davens the words, Keili, Keili, lama zaftani. One of the most famous pieces of Chazanis from Yasser Rosenblatt. Keili, Keili, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why does he say the Shalah writes specifically Keili, Keili, my God, my God? Because there are 13 midas rachim and 13 attributes of mercy. Hashem, Kel. And Kel, she says, the 13 attributes of mercy, it's each one corresponds to another one of the 13 attributes of faith. And the idea of Keli, he says, is the idea of Rachmanus. And Keli is two types of Rachmanus, which is two letters of Hashem's name. And therefore, she says, that's what means Keli, my God, why have you forsaken me? There's a when Esther davened to Hashem that the Shekhinah should come back, and she's thinking that the reason why the Shekhinah went away is because she compared Achashverosh to a kelev, to a dog, and we see that a person is not allowed to speak negatively about the king, somebody which Hashem entrusted. So there is, the Marsha brings down that the halacha that a person who has a flock and two dogs attack them is considered to be a oinus, a mistake, a accident that they cannot prevent. But Esther's two things over here. Now, my problem, Hashem, please consider an accident, like a coercion, to be, don't consider it to be on purpose. And don't take into account that I call the Chashreirish dog. He says both of them are connected to each other. Now, we'll continue over here. I think we'll continue here with Kuntres Umaayon. There's more in this Gemara, but we'll continue here with Kuntres Umaayon. And tomorrow, Amir Hashem will go on to other to the next thing in the Gemara. So we're holding here in Maimer Chav Gimel, Maimer 23. We started it a little bit. Here's English ones.
The way that she put it both because Haman and Achashverosh work together on the decree against the Jews, so they're both.
It's 327.
It's they're both
It's 327.
When you bring up the pasuk for the dog, it seems to apply to both of them.
No, that was the first shot, right? Of the Marsha, that a dog is loyal to its owner, right? As a dog is to its owner, that's how Haman was to Achashverosh.
They were working together.
They were working in tandem for the
Yes,
same goal.
exactly, to obliterate the Jews.
Right, we're holding in Maimer Chav Gimel, Maimer 23. We started off saying about the idea of gematria. Kel Adnai, two names of Hashem. Kel, which we just said, Keli, Keli, my God, which is 31.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 1. And Adnai, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is the gematria of 65. Together they make 96. Tzav. And Tzav, we said before, can mean Avodah Zara, idolatry, idol worship. Asher litzivisi eschem, I love them. Hashem says, I did not command you to serve idols. So the word Tzav, the only world where you have idol worship is the world of Asiya, in the lowest world. The other worlds, you don't have idol worship. And the name Tzav is a gematria of Kel Adnai, the two of them together. So it says, Tzav as Bnei Yisrael, command the Jewish people to bring a daily karban, meaning Tzav is idea of how in this world it's possible to have a existence which is going against Hashem, which denies Hashem. How is it possible? How is it possible to have something in this world which considers itself to be idols, an idol worship, something, a deity of its own? The idea of idol worship is when one bows down to the sun and to the moon. The reason why people bow to the sun and the moon is because they see the sun and the moon is what gives them food to eat. As it says, there are certain crops which grow from sunlight and certain crops which grow from the moon. It's called the nightshades. And because person considers the sun and the moon and whatever else, the water, whatever is giving them sustenance, as something unique, as a source of their bounty. So therefore, they worship and they bow down to whatever is giving them bounty, whatever is giving them all the good that they want. This is a very large mistake. Even though the sun and the moon are the middle, the mediums, the means, through which they are Hashem's messenger to bring down all the goodness to the world. Einam ela shluchei hashpa levad. They're only the messengers of Hashem. They have no power to do good or to do bad by themselves. They're only like the axe in the hands of someone who's holding of the wood chopper.
It's actually the pshat that since in this world Hashem it is completely hidden, so only in this world are we able to make actually that mistake.
Right.
I see.
A mistake cannot be made anywhere else but in this world. The axe by itself has no ability to do anything. The craftsman could use an axe in order to build, use a hammer in order to build. So all of the stars and constellations and the moons and the sun, they're only like a hammer, an axe. Through them, Hashem brings down His goodness and kindness to the world. Who's the one giving the kindness and goodness? Who's the one giving this goodness, bounty to the world? Hashem. Hashem gives it through different, it's called the mazals, constellations. But none of these natural forces which Hashem uses to give to this world have any power of their own whatsoever. And there's no reason why to give any importance at all to them. When Shenemar, as it says, when this shul was built over here, the people go say, wow, we got to, really give credit to the original bulldozer and hammers and cranes which built this building, or to say, wow, the people who built this building. As it says in Yeshaya, will the axe boast over the one who's holding it? So everything in this world is just a messenger of Hashem in order to bring the kindness of Hashem to this world. But no reason that the thing itself has any power of its own to give or not to give. Balderech mashal, for example. If someone sees a beautiful, tall structure, will even think to himself, I should praise the axe that built this building. You will say, how great was a tool used to build such a beautiful building. Or Yomer is going to say, look how beautiful the building which the axe was able to build. You're not going to praise them. You're going to praise the architect. You're going to praise the one who came up with the design, the one who came up with the tools. And the building is called by the name of the person who built it. Not the name of the person, not the name of the tool which was used to build it. And if you want to become the hammer's advocate and say, hey, the hammer was integral to building it. Without the hammer, it never would have been built. Nevertheless, there's no credit given to the hammer. The credit is given only to the messengers who are building using the hammer to build. So this is all a mashal. And the nimshal is anything Hashem gives and sustains the world. Who is the one giving it and sustaining it? Well, it is Hashem, the godliness. As will soon be explained, Hashem made it go through a system, and it goes through mazalas. You call it constellations, but natural means. But who is actually giving any physical sustenance? Who's sustaining the world? Hashem, through using these constellations. It's a tool just that Hashem's using. And so the main thing, obviously, is Hashem, the godliness. And the constellations, meaning the sun, the moon, or anything else Hashem uses, is not considered to be of any importance. Vafilu loikitfeilim gamkein, and they're not even secondary. Rather, they're nothing. They're not considered to be of any importance compared to Hashem. Any natural mean is totally unimportant. And just like an axe has no comparison, even in the minutest sense, to the one wielding the axe, to the builder. So too, all these constellations, meaning the physical means, have no power whatsoever. Any natural process has no power whatsoever. And they're considered to be absolutely nothing. Since they're only messengers, what to do. And they have no power in them whatsoever. There is nothing absolutely in them whatsoever. So this is something in general that we have to believe. Because not always do you see it, because we live on the ground floor, right? We can only see what's happening on the physical plane. If you're coming from Shemayim and you're having a look and you see exactly what's happening, you realize how there's no real obstacle. However, there are times when Hashem peels back the layers of concealment. He opens a curtain, and he's shown to the person is shown how anything in this world is devoid of any independent power. How there's no power to do anything by themselves. For example, in Egypt, when they were judged with 10 plagues, that they had 10 plagues, and the Egyptians were bowing down to different constellations and Mazel Tleh, divine beings and bodies, and they're bowing to sheep, they're bowing to the constellation of goats and sheep above, and they thought that by bowing down to the constellations, they won't be harmed by the makas, by the plagues. And it didn't help them. On the contrary, it says, I will judge every single god of Egypt, all the false gods of Egypt. They were of no help whatsoever. So this is, in general, Hashem makes the world, Hashem runs a world through the tools, and the tools are called mazalas. Natural means constellations. However, sometimes Hashem peels it back. So at the time of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, says everything changed, including the constellations above. They no longer have the shape. Says, the shape of a psula, of a girl, of scales are no longer there in the sky. So it started by the Mabul, but by the Churban it continued. And the shapes of the constellations are no longer there. Why? Because they are only the messengers, the delivery boys, to deliver Hashem's bounty. And Hashem grants through them the physical needs and the bounty, and which is given to the person. Kitzer summary. Kel Adnai B'Gemashri Yatzav Shem Dasiya. The names of Hashem, Kel and Aleph Daled Nun Yud, are the names of Hashem which come down to the world of Asiya, where there is a possibility of idol worship, of even making a mistake and thinking that a middleman, not a middleman, a tool could be a means to itself. However, you should know that even all these means are just a name of Hashem, which Hashem uses in order to create the world, to give to this world. Haishtachava lashemesh vayerech v'mazalis shal yodam rak hashpa gashmis. Those who make a mistake bow to the sun and to the moon, and don't think it doesn't apply nowadays in America. There are many people who bow down to the sun, to the moon, to the water. Hashem gives us so many gifts, right? Hashem gives us an immense amount of power and energy, oil that we find in the ground. Nope, we have to save the sun, we have to save the trees, we have to save the fish, whether it makes sense or not. And there's many things. Those who bow down to the sun and to the moon could mean in a physical sense back then, or we have to save the environment. It's the same exact idea, that the sun and the moon by themselves, they call it Mother Nature. Nature is a mother? What means a mother? There's a mother, a parent in Shemayim, heaven. Hashem, who makes nature, and nature is a tool to serve Hashem. To look at the beauty of nature, but to say that nature is Mother Nature, you can't disrespect her. She doesn't have any, it's not like nature has any power of its own. And that's bowing down to the sun and the moon. However, all the natural means, the constellations, natural law has no agent, has no power to do good or to do not good, to give or not to give. And they are only like an axe in the hands of a wood chopper. And the wood chopper, or the carpenter, the craftsman is Hashem. And according to what Hashem wants, Hashem changes Hashem changes the order of all the mazalas. So when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hashem changed the order of all the constellations to show how the constellations don't have any power of their own. And the only power that exists really is the power of Hashem. And therefore, there's no reason why to give overly credence. Things are going to have to work this way. They can't work this way because there's somebody who's running the show, and that is Hashem, will give everything. And so we're going to discuss in next chapter, what is the role of the constellations, of the natural means? Why does Hashem have to do it? Hashem could just give without having to go through, without using these tools. Right? Meaning, if Hashem wants to build a house, doesn't have to use tools. Just say, and it will be.
Yeah.
Why does Hashem make it happen? Why does Hashem make it go through any physical type of means? And that's what we're going to explain in Hatzvi-Bais in chapter 2. And we'll tie back to what we're explaining about the idea of what happens on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and what happens when a person is judged every single day. Shkoyach, thank you for joining.
Good.
Label, Moshe, Mr. Minsky, and Mirz Hashem, we will meet tomorrow, same time.